Cricket podcast on location at the University of WA. And as promised in the intro, we are now going to talk to somebody who not only worked on the famous program here for bowling actions, but as a biomechanist also did his PhD into off-spinning actions. Harry Chin, welcome to the final word.
Great. Thanks for inviting me, and great to be here with you guys.
So you love cricket as it is, and found yourself working here. What's the backstory there? How did it come to pass that you ended up working on a program that became such a well-known thing through a very specific time in cricket history?
Well, I guess it all started as an Australian growing up. We all loved watching the cricket in the summer, watching on TV or listening to it on the radio. So I've always been interested in cricket, and I came through and did my sports science degree here at the university. And just as I was getting towards the end of my undergraduate years, I was kind of interested in the research. And at that time, Bruce Elliott and his team had a little cricket project going. So I jumped onto that as my honours project. And then from there, it just kind of grew in terms of questions that we wanted to ask in terms of bowling actions. And that's how the whole PhD kind of developed from there.
So are the ICC involved yet? Like when do they come into the picture? When do they realise that the work going on here is at a level that this is the place that they think should be the one testing bowling actions, and it should be such an important part of an international sport?
Yeah, so my understanding was after the no ball call on Murali on Boxing Day, he came and approached Bruce and his team back then just to do some initial kind of analysis on his action, and then from there, Bruce and his team kind of lobbied in terms of what would constitute a mechanical advantage, or like a throw as is in the laws of the game, and then that's when the ICC became more involved and kind of drove the research as to what is a clear advantage from a bowler's perspective in either getting more rotation on the ball for a spinner or getting more speed.
I didn't realise it was the Murali Boxing Day incident that was the catalyst for what was going on over here. It was such a massive media storm. I remember when he landed in Perth, being mobbed by local, presumably international media as well, and coming here and doing his thing. And from there, I guess with the 15 degrees, as it became, I think a little bit later, which was the allowance given for bowlers, we knew that. We were told at the end of the process whether a bowler was bowling legally or not. We would see the photographs or maybe even the vision of them wearing the dots on their bodies. But I don't think anyone really knows what was actually happening in the testing. How was the sausage made?
Well, initially, the rules were there were actually different cutoff mounts for the different types of bowlers. So if you're a spin bowler, it was originally 5 degrees of elbow extension, so the straightening of the arm during the bowling action. And then if you were classified as like a medium pace bowler, you were allowed 7.5, and the fast bowlers were allowed 10. But then during our kind of research, we kind of figured that we kind of realised that all the bowlers were essentially getting no real advantage up until about 15 degrees, and that's when it becomes more visible to the eye as to when something's kind of doesn't look right, I guess, or doesn't kind of pass that as I call the pub test in terms of your actions.
So your job there is to zoom out and say, what are the laws going there to do? What's the purpose of them? And then to scientifically analyse, because there's a perception of an advantage when an advantage actually comes in. So if there's a smaller degree of flex that was the result that there was essentially no measurable advantage to a bowler in terms of trying to do.
Yeah, I guess. So there was quite a few founding factors into what they wanted to set as that cutoff limit. Certainly in terms of, I think the main one was what could an umpire detect? Someone standing a square leg, or the bowling umpire, what could they detect? Or the video umpire, what if they would look at video footage or in real time, what do they think would be that point where it's kind of fairly obvious that something looks a little bit different? The arm isn't staying straight, and that's where that kind of 15 degree cutoff limit kind of came into effect. My recollection is that there was a particular Australian bowler that everyone said they they bowl with a perfectly straight arm, and when he was actually tested, he was around like the 13-degree mark. So that was also a bit of an eye opener to the ICC.
There was that moment
But,
when was it the Champions Trophy where they tested a bunch of the bowlers and found out that everybody was straightening their arm. Essentially, there was a breakthrough of actually this has been happening the whole time.
Yeah, there was a breakthrough around that where every bowler had most of them had, pretty much all of them had some degree of extension during their bowling action.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that like the holy grail for the program you were doing to find that out? Like that's an extraordinary trove of information to suddenly have it in a spot.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't directly involved in that that part of the research, but there was certainly a team that was sent to a few of the competitions that were happening around the world back in that time, and the research finding there was a significant number of bowlers, whether they be spin, medium, fast bowlers, that were straightening their arm to some degree during their action.
Right. And the other part of this was that the volume of bowlers who were sent here through that stretch of time. Because like the program ran until what? Sort of 2017 or thereabouts when bowlers were still being sent here, like in the time frame right there?
It was around, I'll probably say around 2015 to 2017 was around the time that the bowlers were sent to UWA specifically for now.
So over about 20 to 22 years, let's call it that window roughly. There were many bowlers the ICC essentially sent here for their action to be tested. There must have been a tried and true process you went through as soon as the ICC referred them. And I don't know, how did that work? They just rocked up one day, you've got them at the airport, brought them down to the university and put the dots on them?
It was almost like that. I mean, things obviously want to happen quite quickly when this situation arises. So essentially, the ICC would report to the players' governing body, who would then get in contact with us and make the arrangements. Essentially the bowler would turn up. A few things kind of went on behind the scenes before we put the dots on. We'd get a anthropometrist, so they would come and take physical measurements of the bowlers to look at how much range they had at the elbow naturally.
Yep.
And there was quite a few different stories on different bowlers that were able to go into hyperextension, or were in many cases they were in some sort of fixed flexion. So when we asked them to straighten their arm by themselves, they couldn't actually make their arm straight. They have some sort of degree of elbow bend. Like Murali already. Yeah.
There's that lock. He's locked in a bent position as it is.
Yeah, exactly. So they were either most of them were actually kind of a little bit flex, and also they had a carry angle, so their arm was actually pointed out, or their out as well. When we asked them to fully straighten their arm, absolutely.
Because Murali would have visited here a number of times, I assume, because what happened in 1995 wasn't his only skirmish, would be the right term, the only time he ran into trouble on this front.
Yeah, he did visit a couple of times. About 2 times from my recollection. When those bowlers turned up, we would take those measurements. We'd take a whole bunch of other height, weight type measurements as well, and then we'll go to put those famous dots on.
The famous dots.
What do they do? Dots.
That was my next question. Like, give us a sense of, the dots. I suppose we all know that's to do with imaging.
Tell us about the dots.
Is that right word? Imagery. What were they doing? Like, give us an insight to why the dots helps determine the degree.
Yeah, okay. So what the dots are, they were covered in what we call retroreflective material. So they see a material that reflects light, the same kind of material that you get and you see on your running shoes. And the cameras would track the reflection from those markers. So it wasn't actually a video camera per se that was looking at the action. We were just actually tracking where those markers were, and they were placed on various parts of the body that we were interested in. Obviously, the elbow and the upper arm was the main source of interest. So they were used to define where the joints were, and also create or to determine where the segments were as well. So we'd have some markers placed on the upper arm, some around the elbow, some around the forearm, some around the wrist, some around the hand, so that we could essentially create a track and 3D model of the bowler's arm as they were performing their bowling action.
How quickly are you able to crunch data from that? Like, are you talking to the bowler the same day about what you're finding, or is it, are they getting a report in the mail 2 weeks later? Like, when do they get news about it? How's that process?
Yeah, so we try to expedite the process as much as possible. So did often mean some late evenings as well after we tested them in the afternoon. But yeah, we tried to get within like a 24-hour kind of turnaround, at least some sort of preliminary results to the bowler before we then kind of finalised
It went to them first
report.
did it go to them before it went sort of the ICC or something like that?
It kind of went to both of them at the same time. Yeah, we would have the initial numbers that we could inform the board, and then we'd put the complete report together for the ICC, which of course the cricket board would also get, and then from there they could then enact on what they wanted to do with the results if they needed to.
How many balls would they bowl and be assessed on, or how many sessions maybe as well?
Well, we typically did in one session.
One session.
Yep. The number of balls that they bowled, it would vary what they had been called for. So if it was just, for example, their standard stop delivery, they would bowl that one. But if there were some other deliveries that they might have also been called for like their doosra, for example, then
For instance.
I mean, Murali wasn't the only one that bowled the doosra.
Probably expensive too.
So yeah, any of that.
Getting measured for long sleeves, or is it?
Yeah. So any of their variations that either were called for or they were under suspicion for.
But did you have to get them to bowl for a good period of time to be confident that you were actually getting the legitimate delivery? They weren't.
Because this was part of it, wasn't it, Jeff? Part of it was that
Criticism was, how do you know they're not bowling different?
that's right, especially Murali, right? Because there was video released of him bowling. And it's like, Lee doesn't bowl like that in the game. Like, it's hard to, I'd imagine it would be very difficult. Or did you have a way around that?
Yeah, so I mean, they were all kind of very valid points that everyone, the members of the public and the cricket community came up with during the testing procedures. But yeah, we certainly put things into place to try and minimise and try and get them to be bowling as close to their match conditions. So firstly, we would be provided with video footage of the deliveries in and around the ones that they were called for.
Right.
From the television broadcast when they're at the game, so we could actually visualise that. We would set up some of our own video cameras to mimic or as close to. Obviously, we can't set it up as it was in the cricket stadiums, but we would set up a rear and a side-on camera. Yep, same angle, so same kind of view. So, visually we could have a look at a few aspects that way. But then we also took a few kind of performance measures as well, in particular the velocity of the ball. So
Right, because it'd be hard to get the ball to come down at the same speed, even as a skill bowler, without using the action that you used to do.
absolutely, yeah. So we had a cutoff that we would only analyse the balls that were within 95% of the speed that the deliveries were measured at on the ground as well. So if they're bowling 100 kilometres an hour, then if you were bowling at 90, you were going to keep bowling until you gave us enough deliveries for us to
Bowl the ball, shower.
Yeah.
Bowl
Bowl
it
again.
Bowl it again.
Bowl
Go
it
again.
Exactly.
Go again. Did you sort of sorry, Jeff.
What sort of sample size would you need to be confident that you could extrapolate good data from it?
in terms of the number of deliveries. Yeah, so we'll take kind of 10, at least 10 deliveries at that cutoff, and we were analysing all of them. And so essentially, if there was one of those 10 above that cutoff,
that was the threshold.
then
that was worth it.
Then one ball.
Then that would have,
And did you sort of realise when you're analysing this the extent to which it could adversely affect the player's career? Because that is a thing with that is a thing with, like, the term chucker is such a loaded one. Pejorative.
It implies you cheating.
It implies you're cheating. It implies a whole bunch of other stuff too that I think is unreasonable. And it's a tag that players carry around with them. And yeah, we're joking a little bit here because it's kind of a fun topic for us. But there's a serious edge to it. Is that a responsibility that you all felt within you when you're on the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Every time a bowler came in, we kind of knew that, the decision that we're making, the things that we're analysing, could all influence their career. It could allow them to continue on, or it could essentially end.
And your research into off spin specifically, I'm mindful of this PhD a time ago, so I'm not expecting to get that chapter and verse, but the abstract or the executive summary of that when you were analysing the difference between elite bowlers and non-elite bowlers. How did you? What did you find that was different between those two categories?
Yeah. So for our sub-elite bowlers compared to those elite guys, we found a few little interesting factors. Firstly, the elite guys bowled at a higher velocity than also high ball speed than our sub-elite guys. And certainly if you're talking about legitimate actions, the elite guys were certainly able to get closer to or bowl with closer to those numbers, the threshold.
That's it. So it's a nice way of saying great cricket's full of chuckers. So.
No, I think the other way. I think is it the other point?
Yeah, the elite bowlers extended their elbows a little bit more than our sub-elite guys.
So what you're telling me is to take the next step as an off spinner, I've really got to start
bending.
I've got to go from whatever I am at the moment to 14 degrees.
14.8 degrees.
Ideally.
If you want to push the envelope like that, absolutely. You've got to use what's at your disposal. Yeah. Well, I'm interested in academia. Generally, you toil away, you're fairly unnoticed. Someone occasionally gets a prize or something. But for the most part, it's an obscure line of work. And then suddenly this one department at this one university has this global spotlight on it. Not all the time, but now and then. Showback comes to town, Murali comes to town. Big name, world famous players are here. And the work that you're doing is suddenly, this little bit of it is on a global stage. That must have been really strange to be in an academic program, but also had this currency, this public currency, this publicity. It's been a very peculiar thing to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. It was certainly strange, especially when I was, as this was all happening, I was just kind of starting my PhD. And to have, the media kind of turn up to one of your data collection sessions, and, having to poke around and looking around and asking questions, it will certainly put you in the spotlight. Absolutely.
Aaron Chin, it's been so nice talking with you and getting a sense of this program and quirky but important part of modern cricket history. Congratulations on your work and thanks for sharing the final word.
Right. Lovely to be here. Thanks so much for having me, guys.